the largest party was still the Party of Democratic Socialists, the party of the governing president, Milo Djukanovic. He now has 40 seats, and he only needs one more seat to be able to form a coalition, even with a wafer-thin majority. So I think for NATO, the first thing is that we are probably going to be seeing a coalition in Montenegro, and coalition tends to mean a moderation of policies, and therefore I doubt that coalition will want to change the fundamental alignment of Montenegro. NATO membership has already been achieved, and it's negotiating to join the European Union.
What about NATO's more sort of expansionist plans in Eastern Europe? Are they going to have a bit of a rethink?
No, I don't believe they will. I mean, for example, those plans after Montenegro joined 4 years ago have moved ahead also to include now North Macedonia. There are no immediate candidates for NATO membership. Ukraine and Georgia have been promised membership one day, but that's still somewhere off into the future. But I do think for NATO there will be lessons, of course, from this election. But let us not forget that when the last election took place in Montenegro 4 years ago, there were suspicions of a Russian and Serbian-inspired coup, and some Serbs were put on trial in Montenegro afterwards. These elections, although of course they've been contentious, like all elections, have taken place in a much more normal, calmer atmosphere with normal campaigning. The elections have been free and fair, and I think finally NATO will take succor from the fact that even if President Djukanovic's party has suffered some losses, it's still the largest party, and given the economic situation in Montenegro, the impact of COVID, the impact on tourism, I think some people in NATO might have expected that President Djukanovic and his forces would have done even worse during the elections.
From NATO's perspective, how will this election result change its relationship with Serbia, but also the wider Balkans?
I think that's a very good question, Rosie, because I think one of the lessons of this election is that, unfortunately, like so many other places in Europe, Montenegro remains a divided society, with 1/3 of the population being ethnic Serb and often looking towards Belgrade and towards Moscow, as we've seen in this election. And therefore, one lesson will be that we all need to redouble our efforts to integrate various ethnic groups into a set of a form of national identity, more particularly in Montenegro. That surrounds also the government coming to some sort of settlement with the Orthodox Church, one of the contentious issues. But I think, again, your question is right, because I think the second aspect is the more that the EU and NATO can embrace Serbia and bring Serbia into a Western pro-EU oriented course, the more I think in Montenegro, the Serb forces who may feel alienated at the moment will also join that pro-Western course. So yes, the answer does lie very much in how we handle our relationship with Belgrade.
What do you think's prompted this change in Montenegro? 30 years of that ruling party in power, and now as a sort of upheaval.
Well, Rosie, I think first of all, it was predicted. I mean, in a democracy, no party can remain in power forever, thank God. Even a party like the Party of Democratic Socialists of the president that has a firm record of bringing Montenegro into independence, bringing Montenegro into NATO, starting accession negotiations with the EU. But of course, the lesson is that voters don't really give you credit for your foreign policy successes. They're mainly concerned about domestic issues. And of course, when you've been in power for 30 years, inevitably there are allegations of corruption and cronyism and inefficiency. As I mentioned earlier, COVID has had a big impact on Montenegro in terms of the impact on tourism. The economy has been in a bit of a nosedive since 2019. So I'm afraid it's the same lesson for all politicians. No matter how great you are as an international statesman, you have to take care of the domestic situation at home first and foremost. But again, the fact that normal politics are taking place, a coalition will be built, is reassuring. NATO is used, of course, to changes of government. That's what happens in democracies. But I don't, as I said, see any fundamental reorientation of Montenegro's foreign policy.
Let's look further east very briefly, if we can. A headache for NATO is currently the tensions escalating between Greece and Turkey. What can NATO do to try and placate that, and what do you think they will do?
Well, I think the first thing, of course, is to work very carefully with the European Union on this, because the EU is taking the more prominent diplomatic role at the moment. The Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, is in very close touch, both with Athens and Ankara, to de-escalate the situation. And of course, NATO over the years has been used to tensions regarding overflights and military exercises in the Eastern Mediterranean, particularly the summer months. Of course, it's an unwelcome problem to be having. But my sense, particularly also with the United States getting involved in helping out, is that we will eventually get Athens and Ankara around some kind of table and figure out some kind of arrangement to share drilling rights in the Eastern Mediterranean. So I put my faith in the quiet diplomacy, which is certainly going on behind the scenes at the moment.